Welcome to Sponge Takes, where we take the sponge and we...
What the fuck was that? Hello random person, Sab Nino here. Welcome back to Sponge Takes, where we take the sponge and do that. We're recording at 12:30 in the morning.
So what's this episode called and about, Sab?
This episode is season 13, episode 283B, Yellow Pavement. SpongeBob and Squidward star in Mrs. Puff's educational driving film. This is literally just Boat Smarts.
It's really hard not to compare it to Boat Smarts, the short from season 5.
This is just Boat Smarts.
It's like a remake of that short into an episode, even down to the opening and the tire pressure gags. It could work if they made it different enough, but I don't think they did really.
No, I don't think they really extended the story enough. Not in a good way. I don't think the length works as well as Boat Smarts. Because with Boat Smarts, it's a short, so it doesn't take that much of your time, and I feel like they got a lot more mileage out of it. What was here, it feels like they were barely stretching for time.
Especially because of the ending. What SpongeBob's Puppet Show feels like filler.
That felt like it was there because, we don't know how to fill the rest of the episode up. How do we fill up the time?
A lot of people will say modern SpongeBob recycles ideas too much, and I disagree with them and think that they mix up the ideas enough to where it's different, but this time I kind of see what they're saying. Their point is proven this episode, unfortunately. This is a special case. Season 13 has been great, but dang, it's a bummer when something like this comes out.
We haven't gotten a lot of rehashes in post-sequel. Sure, some episodes might be similar, but not to the point where they feel like blatant copies. For example, they've ripped off Pat the Horse a few times. Plus, SpongeBob and Random Land and Squid Frog 2 are technically rip-offs of Pizza Delivery, but because of the new setting and location and the types of jokes they tell, it honestly feels more like a running theme than a flat-out rip-off. What was here, it literally just feels like Boat Smarts. Like, almost identical. And I don't even know how this came about. Did they not like Boat Smarts and just decided, hey, I can do better, and just decided to completely rip off their episode intentionally?
Or did they just completely forget about Boat Smarts and just accidentally remade an episode without even realizing it? I guess the only reasoning I could think of them doing it is because the original was a short.
Yeah, but I don't think it was good enough of an excuse because, if anything, this episode proved why it shouldn't be a full-length episode. It worked better as a short. It was much more properly paced.
Also, the references were a bit heavy, especially to the Krusty Krab training video with, "Can I have my driver's license yet?" And now for the moment you've been waiting for.
God, those were super f***ing obvious, especially since they're already ripping off Boat Smarts, so having that blatant of a reference, which is typically fine in other episodes, or at least just makes me roll my eyes, but in here, it honestly makes it an even worse problem.
That being said, the episode was still fun and funny. It's interesting to see this show tackle the idea again in its modern style. It did get a lot of laughs out of me, but it did feel very unnecessary.
Well, this is a nice segue to the animation and comedy. Ooh.
Oh my god, you're right.
This one is another on-model but wacky episode, similar to the last episode.
I love how SpongeBob is drawn in this episode. He looks extra perfect. The balance of on-model and funny faces on him was really good, and it just feels like a truly great version of the character.
Even though the story is very lackluster and not as good as Boat Smarts in terms of the length, to Yellow Pavement's credit, I do think this episode is funnier than Boat Smarts. Don't get me wrong, not all of them land, but it's enough to the point where this episode didn't feel as much of a chore to watch, even if I didn't like it.
Yeah, I really love the joke when SpongeBob ran Squidward into the sign out of nowhere, as well as when the old lady got all buff right as she was gonna get hit.
Speaking of buff things, when SpongeBob was, I think, adjusting his mirrors, his hand just got abs.
I think he was like honking a horn. Yeah, he's got pecs and a six-pack and everything.
I also love the scene where SpongeBob was helping Squidward with his road rage and how he was actually helping Squidward. That was just a very nice touch. Plus the scene where they were just raking sand. I lost my shit at that because they looked stoned. I'm pretty sure you could edit them with weed and it would fit.
And it's always just nice to see SpongeBob and Squidward happy.
And even though the ending part was complete filler, the animation looked pretty fun. I like how they went for a cardboard look. I also cracked up when SpongeBob made Squidward and Mrs. Puff just kiss SpongeBob, and that was the part where Mrs. Puff snapped. Also, the scene where it's just a blank, again, that's blatant filler. Though I do like the close-up, very first movie-esque. When researching this video, we actually looked at that poster, and that actually led us to my cringy old DeviantArt account, which leads to Tangent of the Week. I predicted Balloon Patrick from the Cosmic Shake. In this piece of art for the character SpongeBob's birthday, I drew a Balloon Patrick, and I didn't even know about the Cosmic Shake. That was never announced. This was even before Rehydrated. I like the design they use in the game a lot more.
I like the tweaks for the real design, but man, yours is a pretty scary prediction. You have the vision.
There was also a Roadrunner reference where there were bottom text that said Periferous something. And I'm gonna be blunt, it would have been a lot funnier if Mrs. Puff didn't read it out loud.
But I do love what followed after it, where he's just jumping on the pogo stick and going, "Hi Squidward, hi Squidward."
Also, during the fake ending, why did Mrs. Puff rip up his fake license? Because SpongeBob wouldn't just use the license illegally. In the episode Oral Report, they actually brought up the idea to SpongeBob to just use a fake license, and he turned it down.
I guess to make it like when she normally rips up his license.
They could have just thrown that in the fire along with the SpongeBob and Mrs. Puff cutouts that he made, because it just felt like a weird thing to emphasize. The last thing I want to bring up, the little hand animation on both Squidward and SpongeBob when they were reaching for the seatbelts. Super fluid. I love it. Okay, trivia. Mrs. Puff's full name is Penelope Puff, but in the game SpongeBob Typing, they actually call her Poppy Puff. But since Penelope was said in the show, I'm gonna classify that as canon instead of Poppy from now on.
This episode aired on St. Patrick's Day, so it also was preceded by a 5-hour-long marathon of the Patrick shows.
You know, I'm surprised they didn't postpone those Patrick Star shows we did on Pat Takes exclusively for St. Patrick's Day.
Or, you know, play Fitzpatrick.
The ending segment had a reference to Powerpuff Girls and possibly Among Us.
On the same day, the morning of, they aired Boat Smarts, coincidentally. We watched Boat Smarts right after this.
The video calling a bad driver a SpongeBob is actually a reference to the season 11 episode Teacher's Pets. And to add on to that, in Boat Smarts, Mrs. Puff doesn't call SpongeBob by name and just refers to him as a boater and only calls him SpongeBob by mistake. But in both Teacher's Pest and Yellow Pavement, she just doesn't give a shit. She's just, yeah, it's SpongeBob. We all know it's SpongeBob. We all know of his existence. Why cover it up? And that was Yellow Pavement. Overall, it was something. Not a particularly good something, but something.
Yeah, it was kind of an underwhelming episode, but, you know, there's still some funny jokes and good animation in there, as always.
That's something I appreciate about post-sequel SpongeBob. Even if an episode's bad, there's still some redeeming quality to it. It's a lot like the first 3 seasons where, even if there's an episode that I don't necessarily enjoy, there's at least multiple good qualities.
There's bad episodes in the first 3 seasons.
What do you guys think of Yellow Pavement? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Are you mixed on it?
Who's gonna be first in the comments? And who's gonna be 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th?
Comment below! And join us next week where we talk about the episode The Flower Pot. And with all that said...
bye bitches.
And with all that said, it's all sad from here.